They found 2 trapped Bigfoots in the river and risked everything to pull them out. The flood hit before dawn. Rain had fallen for 3 straight days, turning the mountain creek into a river that tore through trees like paper. Elias and Jonah were checking the bridge when they heard a sound too deep to be thunder, too desperate to be anything else. A cry. They ran to the bank. Through the mist and debris, 2 shapes struggled against the current, massive, covered in fur, caught between fallen logs at the base of the bridge. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then the smaller one lifted its head, a child, chest barely above water, its hand clawing weakly at the air. Jonah shouted, "It's them from the ridge." Elias didn't hesitate. He dropped his coat, dove into the current, and the cold hit him like a hammer. The water was black, pulling him sideways, snapping branches and dragging him under. He came up gasping, eyes burning, just in time to see the larger creature slam against a log, its leg pinned beneath a branch thicker than a man's torso. He swam toward them, the river trying to turn him away. "Hold on," he shouted, though the roar of the flood swallowed the words whole. The child's eyes met his wide, wild, terrified, and something inside him lit up. He didn't see monsters. He saw a family about to be lost. He reached the branch, braced his legs against a rock, and shoved with everything he had. It didn't move. He tried again. The current ripped at his back, cold biting into bone, but the branch began to shift, inch by inch. "Push," Jonah's voice shouted from the bridge, and suddenly there were hands, ropes, voices, human ones, pulling, hauling, refusing to let go. The log snapped free. The river exploded upward in spray and foam. For one impossible second, the 2 Bigfoots surfaced together, arms locked, eyes wide and alive. Elias shouted, "Go swim with it." He turned them toward the current's bend, where the water calmed near the rocks. The child's hand brushed his shoulder as it passed, warm, real, trembling. Then they were gone. The current took them out of sight. Elias floated there, breath ragged, watching the foam settle back into the dark. For the first time, the river didn't sound angry. It sounded thankful. Before we go further, the narrator's voice lowers. Comment the name of your city, because mercy is never quiet. Sometimes it sounds like a river learning to breathe again. Part 1, The Aftermath. By morning, the storm had passed. The bridge was half gone, one end twisted into the riverbank like a broken arm. Mist clung to the trees, and the valley smelled of wet earth and cedar. Elias stood on the bank, soaked and shivering, his coat heavy with mud. Jonah was still pulling debris from the water, silent, jaw tight. Neither of them had said a word since the current carried the creatures away. The river ran slower now, calmer, almost gentle. But along the edge, the mud told a different story. Elias crouched beside a stretch of flattened reeds. There were drag marks long, deep leading from the shallows up toward the forest. He brushed away debris. The prints were wide, heavy, each one shaped like a hand. "They made it," he whispered. Jonah looked over his shoulder. "Are you sure?" Elias nodded. "Yeah." They pulled each other out. He followed the trail a few steps inland. The prints overlapped, one set small, the other massive. The larger steps were uneven, one dragging, the other firm. The mother's leg, he realized, the one pinned under the log. She was hurt and still walked away carrying her child. Jonah joined him, wiping mud from his beard. Never seen anything like that. Elias smiled, weary. I have. Once. Winter before last. They stood there for a long while, watching the fog roll over the trees. No sound but dripping leaves and their own breathing. Then Jonah frowned, pointing downstream. Wait. Do you hear that? It wasn't thunder? It wasn't wind. It was a low hum, steady, rhythmic, 3 short, 1 long. The same pattern again, only this time. It wasn't echoing through the trees. It was coming from under the bridge. Elias ran to the edge, dropped to his knees, and peered beneath the wreckage. There, tangled among the beams, was a rope, and at the end of it, the limp arm of a man, caught in the current. Jonah, he shouted. They pulled together, hands burning, boots sliding in the mud. The current fought them, but the man came free, mud-covered, breathing shallow. A prospector, someone from town, face cut, coat torn, eyes half open. He coughed water, then rasped 1 word before blacking out. Pushed. Up. Elias froze. Pushed, Jonah looked at him, and they both turned toward the river. The current rippled once as if something large had just gone under. For a heartbeat. They saw it a broad back, a patch of dark fur, then a hand rising briefly from the water, not reaching out, but waving. Then it sank, quiet as the morning mist. Elias whispered, "They didn't just survive. They saved him." If you're still listening, the narrator says, mercy doesn't always pull upward. Sometimes it pushes others to the surface. Part 2. The sign in the water. The prospector lay breathing, wrapped in a blanket near the fire. Elias watched the rise and fall of the man's chest, steady now, but shallow. Every few seconds, water dripped from his sleeves, dark with mud and river silt. Jonah said quietly, he should have been gone. Nobody lasts that long under. Elias nodded. That's what he meant. Pushed up. Something kept him afloat. He walked back to the bank, the mist thinning under early sun. The river was calmer now, its surface shining like hammered glass. But near the broken bridge, the water moved strangely aslow, circular current spinning against the main flow, as if refusing to move on. He stepped closer, boots sinking in wet gravel. Through the clear water, he saw something beneath a wide patch of disturbed silt, a perfect oval, pressed deep into the riverbed. Not a footprint, a body mark. He knelt, peering down, and realized the silt was darker at the center, mixed with small stones and fibers of fur. Whatever had been there hadn't just stood, it had laid down. Jonah joined him, squinting. What the hell is that? Elias swallowed. It's where she was. The mother. She covered him. They stared at the mark in silence. The current tugged gently at its edges, trying to erase it. But the impression held. Even the river seemed unwilling to forget. Elias took a stick, tracing the outline. It was enormous, shoulders wide as a doorframe, arms spread, as if shielding something beneath. He glanced toward the fire where the rescued man lay, and the weight of it hit him all at once. She hadn't escaped the current. She had chosen to stay in it. Jonah muttered, "You think she did that for him?" Elias nodded slowly. She couldn't pull him out. So she pinned herself under the branch and pushed him toward the surface. The river hissed softly, foam curling around his boots. He looked down at the water, and for a second, he thought he saw movement beneath the silt, a ripple, like a lung taking one last breath. The current shifted. Tiny bubbles rose, bursting at the surface in rhythm, 3 short, 1 long. Elias's eyes filled. He whispered, "She's still here." Jonah put a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's make sure she's remembered." They stood there together, heads bowed as the water carried the last of the foam downstream. It wasn't a grave. It was a promise. If you're still listening, the narrator's voice fades in. Mercy doesn't end when it sinks. Sometimes it stays beneath the surface, holding us up, long after it's gone. Part 3. The Return to Town. The wagon creaked down the muddy road, its wheels cutting shallow lines through the thawing snow. Jonah drove, reins loose in his hands, eyes half on the trail, half on the man lying in the back, the prospector. Still pale but breathing easier now. Elias sat beside him, staring out at the tree line. The river glimmered through the pines, its surface calm, but the image of that mark beneath the water refused to leave his mind. Jonah broke the silence first. "You think anyone's going to believe this?" Elias smiled without looking up. "Doesn't matter if they do." A pause. Then Jonah chuckled softly. "Hell, you're starting to sound like one of them preachers." Elias shook his head. "Preachers talk about faith. This was proof." They rode on. The forest grew thinner, sunlight catching on wet branches. Birds darted between them, sparrows, robins, even a hawk circling low. After the storm, it felt like the world had decided to breathe again. When they reached the edge of town, a few men came running from the mill. They lifted the prospector down, calling his name, voices full of shock and disbelief. Someone shouted, "He's alive." Elias didn't answer. He just nodded once and turned toward the river. Across the water, the trees stood perfectly still, their reflections rippling gold in the late sun. And then a sound, soft, distant. 3 short rumbles, 1 long. Jonah froze. "You heard that?" Elias smiled faintly. "Yeah. Guess she heard us too." The wind stirred the branches, sending a shimmer of light across the surface. It wasn't an echo of fear. It was a rhythm of thanks. They stood by the bank until the sound faded, until all that was left was the river moving, peaceful, steady, as if guarding a secret it promised never to tell. "If you're still listening," the narrator murmurs, "sometimes the witnesses aren't men at all. Sometimes it's the river that remembers." Part 4. The Story They Didn't Tell. Night came gentle over the valley. The rain had stopped, and the world smelled of wet pine and smoke. Elias and Jonah sat by the fire behind the old mill, boots drying by the flames, faces orange in the glow. The town had gone quiet, a different kind of quiet this time. Not fear, exhaustion, peace. Across the yard, the prospector slept under a thick wool blanket. Every few minutes he stirred, murmuring something too soft to catch. The men at the saloon had already started talking. Jonah could hear them, voices rolling through the open door. "Damn fool got lucky," one said. "River must have thrown him up." "Yeah," another added. "Elias swears he saw something in the water." Laughter followed, the kind people use when they're scared to believe. Jonah poked at the fire. "You gonna tell him?" Elias shook his head. They wouldn't listen. maybe they shouldn't. Jonah leaned back, exhaling smoke. So what do we do with the truth? Elias smiled faintly, eyes on the river's shimmer beyond the trees. Same thing she did with Mercy. Let it stay where it belongs. For a while, they didn't speak. The flames cracked softly, the night breathing slow and steady around them. Then Jonah frowned. Look at that. Elias turned. Down by the bank, the river had begun to glow. Not bright, just a pale light sliding across the current, following the same rhythm they'd heard all day. 3 short, 1 long. The men stared, neither daring to move. Jonah whispered, "Tell me that's not real." Elias didn't answer. He just watched as the light drifted downstream, turning the water gold before fading into the dark. When it was gone, he said quietly, "She's just saying goodnight." Jonah nodded, eyes glassy. "Then I hope she sleeps well." Elias looked back at the fire, the glow painting his hands red and warm. Somewhere deep inside, the rhythm stayed not a sound anymore, but a heartbeat that matched his own. "If you're still listening," the narrator says softly, "remember this. Not every story needs witnesses. Some are written in water, and that's enough." Part 5. The river that remembered morning came clear and cold. The clouds had drifted east, and the valley lay under a thin mist that caught the first light of day. Elias was the first to wake. The fire had burned down to ash, gray smoke curling slow toward the trees. Jonah still slept, his hat pulled low, while the rescued prospector sat up by the bank, staring at the river like he'd never seen it before. "It's quiet," he said. Elias smiled, his voice rough from the night. "It's listening." The river ran smooth now, no roar, no pull. Just the sound of water sliding over stone, and in the shallow bend, where they'd fought the current the day before, the water was different, clearer, almost glass. He stepped closer. The silt had settled, revealing the mark beneath the shape of 2 bodies pressed together, faint, almost gone, but still there. He crouched and touched the edge. It was warm, alive. The current swirled once, lifting a small wave that caught the sun and threw it back in gold. Jonah came up behind him. "Looks like the river kept her name," he said quietly. Elias nodded. "And her promise." They stood there a while, listening to the world start again. Birds sang from every direction. Somewhere, a tree cracked open with new sap. Even the air felt lighter, as if it had been holding its breath until this very moment. Elias turned toward town. Children's voices drifted from the distance, their laughter carried on the wind. He smiled. It sounded like the river now free, full, forgiving. He glanced once more at the bend, where sunlight danced across the water, and whispered, "Thank you for what you saved and for what you taught us to keep." The wind rippled through the reeds. 3 quick gusts, 1 long. He walked back toward the trail, leaving only footprints and the quiet hum of the morning behind him. By noon, the valley looked untouched. No flood, no wreckage. Just a river that ran clear, a river that remembered. Some rescues never make the news, but they change the way the world breathes. Comment the name of your city. Like this story. Rate it from 0 to 10. Subscribe, because next time, when someone falls, you'll know the river remembers mercy. Next. He waited for the mother to return, but the one who came needed his help. more.